If you've ever stood in the baking aisle clutching 2 packages of sugar, one white, one brown, and contemplated, aren't these essentially the same product? You're not alone. They appear similar, they taste sweet, and they're frequently utilized in identical recipes. But examine beyond the packaging, and you'll uncover that they possess some surprisingly distinct characteristics to reveal. Differences in flavor, consistency, manufacturing, and even how they perform in cooking. Today, we're going to examine precisely what distinguishes white sugar and brown sugar, and why you might select one instead of the other in your kitchen, right here on Stories Behind Everything. Both white sugar and brown sugar originate from the same source: sugar cane or sugar beet plants. These tall green stalks or root vegetables are packed with sweet liquid that's extracted, purified, and crystallized. In its earliest raw state, sugar naturally contains molasses, a thick, dark syrup that imparts a rich flavor and brownish pigmentation. The transformation from that raw crystal to the sugar in your cupboard depends on how much of that molasses is eliminated, or, in some instances, reintroduced later. White sugar undergoes a more comprehensive refining procedure. After extraction, it's filtered, boiled, and spun in a centrifuge to remove virtually all of the molasses. This produces those bright, sparkling crystals we all recognize. Brown sugar, conversely, either preserves some of its natural molasses from the initial processing or is created by adding molasses back into completely refined white sugar. That modest difference in processing alters everything about its pigmentation, moisture content, and taste. Interestingly, the preference for pure white sugar is a relatively modern phenomenon driven by industrialization and marketing. Before the 19th century, most sugar consumed in Europe and America was naturally brown or golden colored because complete molasses removal was technically difficult and expensive. White sugar was actually considered a luxury item reserved for the wealthy, symbolizing purity and refinement in Victorian society. The development of advanced centrifuge technology in the mid-1800s made mass production of white sugar economically viable, and it quickly became the standard. Ironically, what was once the inferior, partially refined sugar is now marketed as more natural and often costs more than its fully refined counterpart. This historical reversal reflects how consumer perceptions of food have shifted. Where whiteness once signified superior quality and modernity, today's health-conscious consumers often associate brown or less processed foods with authenticity and nutritional value, even when the actual differences are negligible. The sugar industry has cleverly adapted its marketing to accommodate these changing preferences, while the fundamental chemistry remains unchanged. White sugar is straightforward. It's pure sweetness, clean, and neutral. It doesn't contribute much else to the flavor profile, which explains why it's so versatile. You can incorporate it into coffee, sprinkle it over cereal, or utilize it in baking without it interfering with other flavors. Brown sugar, however, possesses more character. Thanks to the molasses, it delivers a deeper, more complex flavor. Notes of caramel, toffee, and even a suggestion of smokiness depending on the variety. That's why brown sugar is frequently the preferred choice for recipes requiring a richer, warmer sweetness, like gingerbread cookies, barbecue sauces, or sticky glazes. In other words, white sugar sweetens, but brown sugar sweetens and contributes depth. Another noticeable distinction lies in their consistency. White sugar is dry with individual crystals that flow freely. Brown sugar is softer and clumps readily because molasses is naturally sticky. This moisture makes brown sugar perfect for providing baked goods a chewy consistency. Consider soft chocolate chip cookies that bend rather than snap. In contrast, white sugar tends to yield crisper or lighter textured outcomes like airy meringues or crisp sugar cookies. The additional moisture in brown sugar also means it can influence how recipes bake. For instance, in breads or cakes, brown sugar can retain moisture longer, helping to maintain them softer for extended periods. That's why some bakers substitute in some brown sugar to prolong the freshness of their creations. Here's where things become somewhat complicated. Many individuals assume that brown sugar is healthier because it's less processed and contains molasses, which has trace minerals like calcium, potassium, iron, and magnesium. While it's accurate that brown sugar contains slightly more nutrients than white sugar, the quantities are so minimal that they don't make a meaningful contribution to your diet. You'd have to consume impractical amounts of brown sugar to obtain any genuine benefit, something your dentist and physician definitely wouldn't recommend. Ultimately, both are still sugar, and your body metabolizes them in almost exactly the same manner. Brown sugar isn't simply one product. It exists in different intensities. Light brown sugar has a smaller proportion of molasses, providing it a milder flavor and lighter pigmentation. Dark brown sugar contains more molasses, making it richer, stickier, and more robust in taste. Bakers often select light brown sugar for recipes where a hint of caramel flavor suffices, while dark brown sugar is the focal point in recipes that can accommodate a stronger molasses presence, like baked beans or gingerbread. Here's one more distinction that's worth understanding, especially if you bake only occasionally. White sugar is virtually imperishable if stored in a cool, dry location. It doesn't spoil or deteriorate. Brown sugar, however, tends to dehydrate and harden over time because its moisture evaporates. That's why you sometimes discover it in your cupboard as a solid mass. Fortunately, this is correctable. Placing a slice of bread or a damp paper towel in a sealed container with hardened brown sugar can soften it back up as the moisture transfers. In most grocery stores, white sugar is less expensive and available in larger package options. Brown sugar, while still affordable, can cost slightly more per pound, partly because of the extra step of molasses retention or reintroduction. In some countries, brown sugar is considered a specialty ingredient, while in others, it's just as commonplace as white sugar. So, which one should you utilize? The answer genuinely depends on what you're preparing. If you want a clean sweetness without modifying color or flavor, like in lemonade, frostings, or angel food cake, white sugar is the safest selection. If you're pursuing richness, chewiness, or a warm caramel note, brown sugar is the appropriate choice. Some recipes even employ both, balancing sweetness with depth. And naturally, if you're simply sweetening your morning coffee or tea, it comes down to personal preference. Some individuals love the molasses undertone, others prefer the clean sweetness. So, white sugar and brown sugar may share the same origins, but they're not identical twins. They're more like siblings with different personalities. White sugar is the clean-cut, no-nonsense one, neutral, precise, and endlessly adaptable. Brown sugar is the warmer, richer sibling, slightly sticky, full of flavor, and a little more high maintenance regarding storage. Whichever you select, they both have their place in the kitchen. And knowing when to use each can elevate your cooking and baking from good to exceptional. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you proper recognition for your contribution. Thank you for joining us on this exploration through stories behind everything. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories discovered through the smallest details.